Yes, tangible. Right, I've got some. I think so. Hang on. I've got a sticky, so I'm not sure if I'm going to take that.
We're going
yeah, all the Glasgow ones. We'll take the
and we'll see how time goes. It should be. Which is on? Did she tell
Are you
you?
doing these first?
No.
Yeah.
Which is on? Is it?
Just that button there, if they got on.
Push it down. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to awards. A couple of hours here this morning. We've got two talks for you, but just set the scene for this morning. I'm Simon Richards. I'm the chairman of the ABPS Exhibitions Committee, and I also double up this year.
The Salon Study Circle is about to start in room A on Gallery End. Please would all the members make their way to room A, Gallery End. Thank you.
So we will have a talk from Barry Stagg, the president of the British Thematic Association, this morning. That'll take us about 40 minutes. Then I'm delighted to say that Vincent Schubrecht has come over from Belgium and he's going to talk at the frames for about 15 minutes, or you could take a comfort break at the Court of Honour, which is just down the base of the steps on Patrick Mercedes' Belgian Congo exhibit. And then the award ceremony itself will start here at 12 o'clock. And we have to be out by 1 o'clock, so I can promise you it won't drag on more than an hour. Feedback will be at the frames from 1:15, 1:20. There are sign-up sheets for the pictorial classes at the foot of the steps, and there are sheets here for any of the traditional postal history, postal stationery, and Cinderella, I think. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Barry Stagg. Barry.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. At 5 to the hour, I had an audience of none, so it's pleased to see so many of you here. So I want to talk about theme collecting, what does it mean, and the fun you can have. So why am I can't see it on. I can't see it on here.
Yep.
That'll be fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so why am I a theme-based collector? Before I answer that, could I just talk about collecting in general? A lot of people seem to have an idea that you can only collect one thing, one topic, or one type of collection, which is just not true. I myself have 4, 5, 6 different collections at various stages. There's also no hierarchy. If you want to collect one type of collection, whatever it might be, it's no better, no worse than anybody else's collection, certainly in your own eyes. But why am I a theme-based collector? Well, basically, because I enjoy it. I think there's lots of stuff, lots of learning, and unlike some collections, you never stop. It's almost impossible to say that my theme collection is now complete. You never know what's around the corner. And that's the main reason, because I really enjoy it. It's fun. Meet lots of people with similar ideas. So what is theme collecting? So this is my definition, which is not too different from others. It's a collection of philatelic items on a particular subject that are all related or associated to the theme. And the word related and associated I'll explain a bit later on. So, as many of you know, I collect parachuting, so they are All the parachuting stamps I've got are related to each other, but I do have other material which supports that parachute, like aircraft, for instance, so they are associated with it. Oh, sorry. Just changing on there.
Sorry.
So,
Twins phone technical issues. Try now.
yeah, that's the same one.
It might be that you'll have to miss the screen.
Okay, awesome. I've got to stand here. Right. So what type of philatelic items can you collect? Well, anything you want. There's lots of them out there. I just in a minute just wrote down a few things, and these are a very small sample. I remember Chris Key was asked the same question a couple of years ago, and I think he got over 30 off the top of his head. So there are lots of philatelic items out there. I'll mention just a few. The stamps, booklets, postcards, postal stationery. There's lots and lots. You can collect as much as you like. So what subject can you collect? Well, again, anything you want. Parrots here, for instance, there's a nice collection of parrots down on the hall. I enjoy. Or cats or ships. Anything you like. Absolutely anything you like. So what subject should you collect? Well, you should collect what you want to do, not what somebody else suggests is a good idea. But history has shown that most people, collections, they have some relationship to it. They collect things on trains because they're keen on trains or perhaps even work in the business. I collect parachutes because I was foolish enough to try it once or twice many decades ago. So often you have a relationship to that topic. Maybe, again, maybe something you've been working in for some years and know a lot about. And thing collections take a long time to put together. And you need that enthusiasm to keep you going. So I mentioned what was related to or associated means. And I think there is a difference. So all the things which parrots are a good example, they're all related to each other because they're all showing pictures of parrots and very colourful pictures of parrots. But if they was associated, you'd have things like food parrots eat, for instance, or where they live and whatever. And I think there's an important difference between the two. Where can you find this material? Well, the answer is almost anywhere. Lots of sites, websites will sell you things, auction catalogues, books, you name it. Lots of dealers here. Trouble with thematics, or one of the problems, all the fun of thematics is you often don't know what you want. You can spend hours looking through a dealer's stock and find nothing of interest. And most dealers, I would say yes, most dealers don't sort thematically. One or two do, but not very many. So even if you know what you want, it's still a bit of a search. I recently come across the bottom one here, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, the Colmet website, which lists collectible items in gross categories. And there you can see, they're not for sale, but they tell you they exist. And more interestingly for us, perhaps, they give us the SG number, the equivalent American number, German, and information about that stamp. But also, if you're into other things like, there's a section on chocolate bar collecting. And so all the different chocolate bar wrappers ever known to mankind are listed there if that's what you collect, or beer mats. There's hundreds of different things on there. So you know what to look for. It's well worth having a look at. You never know what you might find in there. The more you learn about the topic, the more research you do to it, the more opportunities certainly throw up. And sometimes they come from inspiration from other collections, and not necessarily thematic based or theme based ones. So it's always well worth looking at all the other collections to see what's out there. You just don't know what you might find. So what is the link between topical, thematical, open philately collecting? I think if you look at it, if you add the theme and take away the associated, you're left with topical. And topical isn't a class here in the UK for judging, but you can collect it. Nothing wrong with collecting on a topic. A lot of people do. A lot of young people start doing that, collection of butterflies or dogs or cats. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if you have the theme and add a story to it, it becomes a thematic collection. And if you have the theme plus a story plus non-philatelic, then you have open philately. But there's a big but with all of that. Only matters if you're exhibiting on what you call it. You can call it what you like if you're showing it to your local club, if you're showing it to friends or the U3O people or anything except exhibiting. You don't need to know and worry about it. Is this a topical collection or a thematic one? It's your collection. You deal with it as you want to. It only matters if you're exhibiting. I should make it clear that this is not a progression. I'm not suggesting at all that you start with a topical collection and finish with an open collection. That is totally wrong. They all stand on their own merits, and they're equally difficult. Anybody who thinks that doing a topical exhibit is easy, I suggest they try one. It is a lot more difficult than you might think. So here's some examples of theme collecting, which you can find downstairs. The one on war bonds on the left-hand side is quite interesting. The one on the right is there's a page from the Red Cross story, which is an interesting read. And the energy and environment, there's lots of material there, and the loss dependency. There's another collection down there. People have spent years, in many cases, putting these together, and they're quite interesting to read and have a look at. So if you haven't, I do urge you. And one on the left is on capercaillies. I've been practicing saying that. Before I put this up, because I carried this one in, and there's 2 frames of it, and I didn't think there was 2 frames worth of capercaillie stamps in the world, but trust me, there are. And it's quite interesting, and it's something pride and joy. And the last one here I want to just mention is a wonderful place called Bishop of Briggs, a village which has now developed into a town, and he shows it as a story in postcards, which again is quite interesting. And they're all downstairs. So can I collect postcards on a theme? And of course you can. I've just mentioned a small example there. But it's exactly the same. Exactly the same, of course you can. And there are so many different themes on postcards. And this is one of my own. Some of you have seen this before. This is actually on the theme of parachuting, and only 3 of those pictures, well, 2 really, show parachuting, and the rest all support them, the aircraft and the little stories around it. I always like showing this one, the top right there, where the parachute is sitting under the wheels. This is just before the First World War. Sitting there with the aircraft charging down the grass runway with your backside about 6 inches above the ground, then jumping between the struts of the wheels. I think a large degree of alcohol must have been involved. But that's downstairs as well. So you can collect postcards on a theme, and many people do. An awful lot of people do. But perhaps the most important thing is the story. What story are you going to tell? And every topic, every subject doesn't stand on its own. If I may use parrots again as an example, it's a fine topic, but by definition, they eat, they live, they interact with the human race. So if you want to tell that story as well, then do so. It's every single subject has other material around it. One of the important points in telling a story, which people don't often recognise, is that it doesn't have to be true. You can make the story up. Postcards, for instance, postcards of a particular location, you can do it as an imaginary walk around that place. One of the best postcard exhibits is actually an imaginary journey around the hotspots of Edwardian Europe, around all the nightclubs, some beautiful, beautiful coloured cards. And of course, the journey didn't happen, but that was the story which was put together. So it can be fictional. The other thing is, remember the scope. Please tell the audience how big this is. Otherwise, you could spend a lifetime. I do remember, I'm sure some of you do remember, a collection we saw, I think at the Old Royal some years ago on birds, I seem to recall. And there were, I was going to say thousands, I'm not quite sure if that's an exaggeration, but certainly hundreds and hundreds of stamps on birds. So if you put a title like birds, you'll never complete it. Just too big. So make sure you have a scope and you know what that scope is. By all means, collect every bird stamp in the world if that's what you want to do, and this particular gentleman did. And it was an absolutely massive collection, but I'm not sure what the story was. Like all good stories, it should have a beginning, the middle, and the end. And the end needs to be an end. It doesn't just peter out. If you want to tell a story, don't let it peter out. Make sure it's a really solid end, not an artificial construct, because that's the nice cover you've got and I want to show it. And make sure it's got a good end. And like all stories, make sure it's got some structure. Looking at a bit more about exhibiting, make sure, and to some extent in displaying, make sure that your story fits the page or the frames. You can do a story on one page, and a number of people now, including ourselves, the BTA, are doing competitions on one page. And it can be done. It can be done. One frame is more typical, and some topics are just not suited to one frame. Again, let's go back to birds. If I saw a title of birds and it's in one frame, it's just far too big a topic. And the reverse is also true, trying to make 5 frames out of something which is, the story is too small. Looking at exhibiting, as you know, there are just the 3 main classes. As I said before, we don't do topical in this country. I just want to say a quick mention about judges. It may surprise you all, but judges are human. And I mentioned that for the very simple reason, if you get 79 on one competition and get 81 the next time, please don't be too amazed. 2 points, a lot of this is subjective, not all of it, but a lot of it is subjective. And you could easily gain or lose a couple of points. Also, we sometimes are seduced by the way it looks. It can be a brilliant story, but if it looks awful, then we are going to be, we don't perhaps realise it, but we're going to be biased perhaps against it. So be careful how you present things, but we are human. I think that's right, Simon, isn't it? We are human? Yeah. So let's look at thematic exhibiting. It's interesting how many people have never read the rules. I know that's a bit of a chore, but nevertheless, they are there for a purpose. So always worth reading the rules. And the story is a key element. If there's not much of a story there, then it's difficult to see the beginning, the middle, and the end, what you're trying to tell us. The story will always need a title. You'd be surprised how many people put something in without a title. That's not uncommon in the past. The other important point is please make sure you show a wide variety of philatelic items. I mentioned before, there are at least 30 different types of philatelic items. Telling a story all in stamps is fine if you want to show it to people. But if you want to, in a display at a club, nothing wrong with that at all. But if you want to enter the competition, then it needs to have a variety of material from as many countries as possible. Again, I mentioned earlier the scope. Make sure you understand the scope of what you're trying to do, and the plan. Surprisingly, a plan isn't a heading which says plan and anything underneath it. It does need a small plan, a bit of a structure, so we know what we're looking at. If you like, it's a bit more than the chapter headings, but we need to see what you're trying to tell us. So a page from the Thematic Exhibit, a variety of material on there, from a variety of countries. Let's have a look at open philatelic exhibiting, some key points. So all the points I just made are on thematic. But this time we've got non-philatelic items to put in there as well. It'd be good to have, when you put those things in, like medals, for instance, just tell us a bit about it, some technical information about whatever it is you put in. We don't want a war and peace, but we would like to know what this thing is you put in and its relevance to the story. And although we don't count them up because we don't have the time, the non-philatelic items shouldn't be more than 50%. This is a philatelic competition, not a medal exhibition. So please don't put too many of them in and overwhelm it. And this is an example with a variety of material there. And postcard exhibiting. So again, same as thematic, apart from the wide range of philatelic material, because postcards are meant to show postcards. Technically, picture postcards. And I found that A3 sheets gives you far more flexibility than A4. You can actually get five postcards on an A3 sheet, and it looks, I believe, a lot better. And give some technical information about the postcard, who designed it, printed it, took the photograph, how was it printed, what type of method of printing, etc. Again, because that is quite useful for the reader to see. And a page from a postcard exhibit. You'll see the technical information at the bottom. But this has been a very quick run through theme-based collecting and exhibiting. There's lots and lots of books out there about the topic. I hope you found this summary useful. Please don't forget, have fun, but that's what it's really about. If it's not fun, then don't do it. Well, I left you with a few references there. Don't be put off with the topic. The second title, Topical Adventures. They do cover thematic and open philately as well. They don't cover postcards that much, but it is quite new, a little expensive. The Royals Library certainly has a copy of it if you want to have a look at it. And the one at the top is been around a few years, but there's still a lot of good information in it. And more importantly, readily available on well-known bookstores on the web for a very modest price, and you get a lot of good information from that. Oops. Thank you very much. Oops.
Good prompt.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got a few minutes for questions.
Okay, any questions? Let's rush out the door quickly.
Why don't we do topical collecting as a discipline?
The honest answer is, I don't know. It is difficult to do, it's surprisingly difficult, but I don't know. Just historically, is it, Simon, do you think?
Would you judge it?
No, I would be happily judging it, yes. Yeah, sounds good, there we are. Got to another job.
Well, my experience of that when I was competitions officer for Sussex was that people, I can remember one particular person who always entered what we call topical. She had the pages of stamps. She did well, and I questioned one of the judges once because I said she hasn't got the variety of material. And he said, no, a bit like you're implying, but it's really difficult to get some of these stamps. And he was impressed with what she got. They just didn't call it topical. But there's no reason why it shouldn't be included in thematics, and the judge just makes what they will of it. Yep.
I look forward to it. Look forward to it. Anything else? Yes, please.
Great, thank you.
Oh, great. Another question?
Bill?
More of a comment. What I've come to realise in the last year or two is our thematic collections is a much bigger subject. It's a much bigger much bigger subject abroad in Europe and so forth than it is in this country, where it tends to it tends to occupy a place on its own and not intermingle all that much with other things. And you don't often see top level thematic displays in this country, but as I say, abroad, it's almost the main subject. Personal history is probably slightly ahead, but thematic is definitely a very major subject, and people take it very seriously, and quite right too. And I think in a way, the answer to the point about the topical is that you can get so far with the topical exhibit. But if you want to make a really rounded and complex story, then you have to go a bit beyond it. It's just purely topical. It's almost a subset within the theatre. That's my, it's just
Barry, you mentioned postcards in quite a bit of detail, and you also mentioned the connection of the thematic exhibit. This is a very tricky subject because you can use a picture postcard in a thematic exhibit if it's been issued by an organisation, the Royal Mail or something like that. That's something that people don't always appreciate.
Thanks, Brian. Yes, indeed, indeed. But if it's not, then we can't. Yeah, absolutely.
Barry, on the subject of postcards, you stressed the importance of technical information when you write a postcard entry. To what extent is that technical information equally important in an open entry?
Not quite as important in the sense that I would like to see something on a postcard exhibit all the time, because there's a number of things you might not know, but you can more than make a good stab at each year, each date. We certainly can make a stab at how it was produced in terms of, was that half tone or full colour or whatever. So you could put some things down, and I would expect to see something every time, but I wouldn't necessarily want to see all the 6 or 7 possibilities. If they were there, that's fine, it's pretty rare. But you know, yeah, I think it's important to tell people, the visitors and the judges, what the heck it is. And medals are a good example. Often you can't read them very well because either the angle of the light or how small the writing is. And it's good to know just a bit more about it. And this medal is and this is how it fits in the story. So I think it is important to label it as much as you can. Because if you don't tell them and they can't see it, how does it fit into the story for people to read it? So I would always try to put something on every non-philatelic, however small. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. We haven't got a second talk for you this morning, but this one will be by the frames. If you want to listen to Vincent Shoebreaks talking about our invited display from Patrick Mercedes on the stamps of the Belgian Congo, it's the one in the Court of Honour, just at the foot of the steps. Vincent is going to talk for no more than about 15 minutes, so we can take the opportunity for a quick comfort break, and we will start the awards here at 12 o'clock, handing out the certificates and medals. So please, if you want to go and take advantage of that, do be back here for 12 o'clock. Vincent has been briefed. Thank you.
That's my.